morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to our core ALM webinar on the migration from SAP Solution Manager. So thanks everybody for joining today's call. My name is Doug Kreinhutter. I'm a client partner here at Core ALM. Been at Core ALM for about 9 years now. Prior to me joining Core ALM, myself and many of my Core ALM colleagues worked at SAP, and that's where we all came from. So anyways, our presentation today should run a little bit less than an hour, so we're very thankful for you to join. So I'm going to give a brief overview, and then I'm going to hand it over to Valdrins Bahia, who is one of our ALM architects, to give you the presentation on the actual migration, what we're going to discuss today. So thanks everybody for joining. So as mentioned, Core ALM, who are we? We basically are a boutique service provider and product development company. We've been in business for 15 years. As mentioned previously, most of us came from SAP. While we were there at SAP back about 15 years ago, our founder was the product line manager for application lifecycle management and solution manager in North America. And during that time, we were doing ECC deployments, and he thought it was a good idea or good opportunity to basically bring solution manager capabilities to a broader set of the SAP customer base, and started the company there. Since then, we've also gotten into building products. Right now, we have a number of different connectors where we connect popular Agile and DevOps tools into SAP, mainly into Solution Manager initially. But now with the advent of Cloud ALM, we also have those connectors available into Cloud ALM. And then also our newest product, which is our direct to STMS, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But anyways, that's our product offering there. So in terms of customers, we've worked with some of the largest SAP customers globally. Many of them not only use our services, but run our tool sets as well. So we've had plenty of experience in both regulated and non-regulated industries, and pretty much any industry you can imagine. Sample list of the customers is below. Moving forward, how we actually play and where we actually work is really in this DevOps space. So we cover all areas of DevOps for SAP, historically with Solution Manager, and now moving into Cloud ALM. So on the planning side, we work with products like Signavio, Jira, and Azure DevOps. On the build side, the same thing there, those Agile tools with Azure DevOps and Jira, as well as in testing. Our primary testing tool is really Tricentis. That's our primary tool for doing testing now. Historically, we'd always promoted the SAP Solution Manager tools, but moving forward, we're moving forward with Tricentis. And then on the release and monitoring side, you can see that we also have integrations into Jira as well as into ServiceNow and Azure DevOps. How we actually think about this and the problem we're really trying to solve is this anomaly that occurs in most every company where they have a DevOps strategy that is pretty much outside of SAP. So their DevOps strategy for non-SAP is pretty standard. We see this commonly is that they're using Jira and Azure DevOps for product development and projects. And then when it goes into operations, using ServiceNow or some of their combination there above. The benefit of this for non-SAP is this common Agile and DevOps processes, as well as common compliance and audit, and then unified CIO reporting. So these are all some of the things that, as a benefit by having this integrations between these tools. And this is very standard, it's probably very standard in your organization as well for the non-SAP side. The challenge is when you get to the SAP side, is that SAP is its own different animal, right? And so oftentimes customers have challenges just managing SAP on its own, let alone trying to connect it into a global or enterprise DevOps strategy. Fortunately for SAP, we've had SAP Solution Manager for the last almost 9 years or so, and or longer than that. 7.2 has been out for 9 years, but I think Solution Manager has been around for about 20. And so that's done a good job of being able to manage that complexity of SAP using that tool. Unfortunately, Solution Manager is going away, and that's what our webinar is about today. But for us, our thing is where the problem we solve was actually this integration. So we have these connectors that historically have gone into Solution Manager, whether you're using Jira or Azure DevOps for project work or ServiceNow on the operations side. We have connectors that basically unify this DevOps and Agile process strategy. So all the processes you're currently using for the enterprise for non-SAP, you can basically loop SAP into that common process flow. So they're all using basically the same and getting the values that we talked about before. The other thing too is that from an SAP perspective, we look at being able to take a standard DevOps strategy and really increase innovation. Well, why is that? Why would you say it's increase innovation? Because by basically using common processes, we can actually push more through the system. And if you're going to push more through, maybe it's more changes, that are problem areas, but those changes could also be enhancements and innovation. So we look at it as a real positive. Moving forward though, as you guys know, SAP Solution Manager is end of life coming up. So we now have Cloud ALM on the horizon, and we'll talk to you a little bit about Cloud ALM today and the migration path from Solution Manager to Cloud ALM. But another area that we've explored into and we think has high value is maybe even looking at going directly to TMS. This would be for change and release management. So if you think about, if you're familiar with Solution Manager, and if you use Charm, for instance, that basically guides you through the process of that change and release process on the back end, it uses STMS for the transfer delivery. And so the thing is, what basically the functionality in these tools is very similar to the functionality that already exists in the Agile tools. So our thought there is that maybe actually removing that. Today we'll be talking a little more about the Cloud ALM integration, but like I said, if you're interested and want to learn more about our direct to STMS connector, this is something that's become very popular and has it basically removes the need for having Solution Manager or Cloud ALM. It's just another option. We're not saying that it's going to be better or worse, or if you want to stick with Cloud ALM, or if you want to go with continue to go with Solution Manager. Doesn't matter which path you go, we have an integration for you. And so that's a list of these integrations here. Also, we have all the services that to back this up. So we do lots of Solution Manager deployments. We do lots of S4 projects using Cloud ALM. We've built custom connectors for customers. So pretty much we're game for almost anything for anybody if there's any questions or concerns about how you want to integrate SAP or Solution Manager or Cloud ALM or STMS into your SAP environment or into your Agile toolset. We'd be happy to help you out. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter today, who's Valdrins Bahia. So let me see if I can get you over here.
Thank you, Doug. Can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yep, looks great. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Valdrins Bahia, one of the ALM architects here with Core ALM. In today's session, our goal is to go through this agenda, which is going to be transitioning from SAP Solution Manager to other tools primarily, so not necessarily just the Cloud ALM. However, if there's any type of missing capabilities, what are some of those tools that we're going to show or demonstrate in today's presentation? The next thing is we're also going to go ahead and compare some of the features of SAP Solution Manager versus Cloud ALM. So just so you have an idea, what is the difference between those tools, especially if you're a heavy user within SAP Solution Manager today. And then we're going to talk about implementing and optimizing your new tool set. For example, once you do migrate from SAP Solution Manager or decide to use SAP Cloud ALM or any other tool, how do you optimize those tools for operations? We're going to go into a live demonstrations, given the fact that this is a demo on many capabilities. Well, we'll see based on the time that we have at the end, and then we'll give you an overview of the different tool set that we'll show within this demonstration. Last but not least, we'll save some time, about 10 minutes at the end of the call, for us to go over some questions and answers that you might have. So feel free to write any questions here within the chat, and then the moderator will take those questions and then we'll ask them at the end, so that way we don't forget them for the last. Okay, so from an ALM functionality perspective, and this is a different capabilities that you probably have been using throughout the years within SAP Solution Manager, at least probably for the 10 or 15 years within this area in here. You may not be using every single one of these capabilities, but depending what are some of those capabilities, you have to make a decision at some point here with the solution manager coming to end of maintenance as to what are you going to migrate to. For example, is it going to be something Cloud ELM? And then also if Cloud ELM has some other integration points with other tools, or are you going to completely migrate to or transition to a different tool that Cloud ELM does not have that type of supportability or just does not support what you're utilizing today. On the here within the Cloud ELM functionality, it's pretty similar to what you have seen in Solution Manager from a acronym perspective. However, as you utilize, if you have utilized Cloud ELM or if you haven't, as we go through this demonstration, you'll see that the actual features and etc. are very different from SAP Solution Manager. And then last but not least, also some of the benefit of SAP Cloud ELM is that it's more open with APIs, where, for example, if there's a functionality that's not within SAP Cloud ELM, you always have third-party integrations or open APIs within Cloud ELM that you could integrate with some of the tools that you might have in-house or something that you might look to bring to integrate within that tool. Now, as we plan to transition from SAP Solution Manager into different tools, for example, there is a couple of different readiness that you can do currently. There's a readiness check capability within Solution Manager that you could utilize to understand, for example, what is some of the functionality that you have today in Solution Manager that you could see if it's possible to migrate, for example, to SAP Cloud ELM, or if it's not supported, for example, then you'll have to make a decision as to what is that alternative tool that you may be able to migrate to. So this is going to give you an idea what are some of the capabilities from Solution Manager to Cloud ELM, and then if, for example, if those capabilities are not equivalent at that point, we might want to think about third-party tools that you want to migrate into. So once you have this readiness check, let's say, or for example, if you're able to compare this tool side by side, similar to the previous screen that I was showing, at that point, you can decide as to if you will need an additional tool from Cloud ELM for you to migrate those capabilities into. Now, just to kind of give you an idea, the planned maintenance strategy for SAP Solution Manager. So there's going to, obviously Solution Manager is going to go until the end of 2027 for operations, and at that point, it will be at the end of the maintenance. This is anything that you do today from a monitoring perspective. If you're using it for, let's say, business process monitoring or technical monitoring, etc., all of those capabilities will be out of support at the end of 27. From an implementation in ITSM, so when we refer to this, so anything, for example, focus build, anything such as test suite, change and release management, or ITSM, for example, that will automatically be included into an extended maintenance until the end of 2030. And then after that, obviously, will be only for customer specific maintenance. Now, the only thing is, for both of these, so there's really no plan for further releases after SAP Solution Manager 7.2. So for example, besides some of the support packs or the current support packs that are there's not going to be any additional, let's say like 7.3 Solution Manager or something in that nature. Both SAP Focused Run and SAP Cloud ELM, those are the two tools that are supported or that are supported within this past the end of 27 and end of 2030 as ALM tools from SAP. Now, so migrating some of the existing capabilities to alternative tools. So one of the main areas that we're going to look into that we get many questions from our customers is if, for example, you are using SAP Solution Manager Charm today, and especially if you have it integrated with different tools such as Jira, ServiceNow, and Azure DevOps, for example, this is where you have some alternative options from Cloud ALM, since it has only very basic workflows today and not all of the features. So from Core ALM, we do have a direct integration with SAP Transport Management that supports both Jira, Azure, and DevOps. So you can directly manage all of your transports, for example, from either one of these tools. You can create transports, also supports transport of copies, and then you can also import these into a production environment in mass change. It does support, for example, cross-system object lock and downgrade protection, and you have the additional features such as coupling, decoupling, and multiple deployment options, for example, with no additional infrastructure. So you would have a direct integration between, let's say, Jira, ServiceNow, or Azure DevOps to your let's say S4 environment or any other ABAP environment that you have within your landscape. And it does also support retrofit, especially if you have any type of M+1 or M+2 environments and you're trying to keep those environments in sync between project and maintenance. Now, just to kind of give you a high-level idea of what this looks like. So, for example, you can integrate this directly within your current change process. Let's take an example. If you're using ServiceNow and you already have a SAP workflow, but you do you create transports and etc. Outside of that workflow, you currently have Charm, for example. Therefore, here you can integrate the transport management area directly within your ServiceNow workflow without making any type of modifications to your workflow or having to customize that entire workflow. So in this case, you can manage the transports directly from here and also manage your development and configuration approvals, for example, similar to what you do today without having to change your process. Okay, now in the next topic here, we're going to go into comparing features of SAP Solution Manager versus Cloud ALM. Really, the goal for us to compare these features is to give you an idea as to what are some of the Cloud ALM features that you will be, let's say, migrating to if you plan to utilize the Cloud ALM. Now, first to begin with, what are some of the, let's say, cost for having Cloud ALM? There's actually, from a hardware and infrastructure perspective, so regardless for Solution Manager, if you have it on-prem or if you have some SI or that someone is hosted in a different infrastructure somewhere that's maintained by one of your SIs, regardless, you would need some type of hardware and infrastructure for you to maintain. Within Cloud ALM, this is a cloud solution, so you don't necessarily have to have any type of hardware or infrastructure to host that environment. Configuration and onboarding, so there's really no configuration required, and you know, besides some of the customizations that you could make within the tool, you know, like dates and etc. Other than that, there's no configuration within SAP Cloud ALM itself. Also, from a user onboarding, it's pretty simple. You could modify some of the changes, but however, there's no such thing as maintaining PFCG roles and so on that we've done in SAP Solution Manager. As far as operations goes, for example, within Solution Manager, we had to deploy, let's say, agents in order for us to monitor different environments and so on. In this case, with Cloud ALM, there's no requirements to deploy any type of agents within your infrastructure. It's more of a push method directly from your, let's say, ABAP systems to Cloud ALM in order for you to monitor this. Also, operating of SAP Solution Manager, obviously you would have to have a knowledgeable team in order for you to operate SAP Solution Manager. There's, given the fact that this environment is operated by SAP and, let's say, patched and upgraded and etc. You don't necessarily have to have a team for operating SAP Cloud ALM. Primarily, what we suggest from Core ALM is that you definitely have an owner of the tool, where, for example, as far as the admin, onboarding users and etc. But other than that, there's no reason to have an entire, let's say, basis team to monitor this environment. Also, deployment as far as SAP Note support packages are upgrading, that's not required as well. So from a cost perspective, there's no need to keep this environment up and running and so on. As far as the memory and extended usage of Cloud ALM, depending, for example, how heavily this environment is used, you may, if you do need additional memory, at that point you could extend the usage of the Cloud ALM solution. But however, there's a certain memory allocated for each customer that's included with your license of SAP. Now, to start comparing between solution documentation and Cloud ALM, there's a couple of, there's really, you have three different methods of how do you store documentation within the tool. So once you migrate this, you have the option, for example, where you could have your documentation, you could store them in one of your storage locations. So for example, let's say you have your documentation in SharePoint, and then you could create reference links for all of your documentation between Cloud ALM and SharePoint. So it pretty much would be just a link instead of actually storing the documentation with Cloud ALM. Now, SAP released not too long ago also the DMS integration, for example, where you could now, if you do decide to store your documentation within the DMS of SAP, at that point you could have a direct integration between Cloud ALM and DMS. Therefore, you could store all of your documentation directly within Cloud ALM, and then you would have the extended DMS integration to Cloud ALM. Now, from a process authoring perspective, on the right-hand side, what you're going to see is what we had in SAP Solution Manager, where, for example, you had a very complex versioning management of documentation, or actually any type of process hierarchy or test cases and etc. For example, we have different types of branches, and you could have these as many branches as you needed, for example, in order for you to maintain the different versioning of documentation. In this case, within Cloud ALM, you'll only have let's think of these as two different types of versioning. One is draft and the other one is published. This way, for example, at any given time, if you have any type of process flows and etc. that you're working on, there will always be in a draft status until you decide to publish them. So for example, it as a final version. And that's how the versioning will be done in Cloud ALM, versus what we've done in the past in Solution Manager is published it from one branch to another in order for us to have the latest version of that, let's say, document or a business process flow. Now, and to go a step deeper into primarily into around SAP Solution Manager, ITSM, or Charm, for example. It's one of the topics that we get asked the most about, especially for those customers that are currently using Charm. On the right-hand side, you'll see that you'll have all different types of changes, including some of the custom that we have many customers that currently use today, for example. So you'll have your let's say your IT or your request for change, and then you have all of different types of changes and your custom changes that we usually use in order for us to manage different types of transports. So in this case, most of the common ones, which is the normal and the urgent change that we've seen, these are usually utilized to manage different types of transports and also projects as well within an SAP landscape. Versus within Cloud ALM, you can think of this as a simplified way to manage changes. For example, you can think of the IT or the request for change to be a requirement. And then also, in addition to that, you'll have features which actually will manage different types of transports, for example, within your landscapes. Let it be if it's a cloud environment, or if it's something that you have on-prem, where you can manage those transports, and it has a certain workflow that you would go through within Cloud ALM. Now, you could also tie in different user stories and project tasks within that feature, for example, in order for you to deliver a change into a productive environment. So it does have some good integration points that you got to utilize to manage all of the tasks for a certain change request. Now, this correction is still planned in here, so this is not within Cloud ALM yet, but SAP also has a plan to introduce a correction similar to what we had, for example, like a defect correction within SAP Solution Manager. To dive a step deeper into the feature workflow, given the fact that we only have one, so there's really only about, let's say, 5 statuses in here that the feature goes through, from an implementation all the way to deploy, which means it's deployed into a production environment. So very simple. So it does have strict workflow. It does have some roles that you could control these statuses with, for example. So not everyone can promote a change into QA, or let's say, for example, into a productive environment. Therefore, you can control it even if you do not decide to integrate with an external workflow such as SAP has here. Now, if that's not sufficient for your needs, then you can also have a SAP BTP workflow management, for example, where you have an API between each one of these statuses, and then you could also integrate additional workflows via your SAP workflow management. So that way, for example, you could control where is the transport, and etc. And you could control multiple approvals if needed within this SAP workflow, instead of just having it within the feature. Now, on the test management side, there's within Solution Manager, there's a lot of functionality that we're not going to compare each one by one. However, SAP Cloud ALM, it's primarily focused on orchestrating the testing, for example. So if you're using any type of test plan and etc., and if you have manual and automated test cases within your Solution Manager, it's possible that SAP Cloud ALM could offer a test orchestration for example, where you could have test plans, you could have manual and automated test cases, and then you could also execute those. In addition to that, there's also defect management, for example, where you could have within your test orchestration in order for you to resolve defects. Also, especially if you do have any type of automation tools today, this is where you could integrate Cloud ALM with those third-party automations, and then you could orchestrate, for example, all of the testing directly from Cloud ALM. One of the main automation third-party integrations that's native to Cloud ALM is going to be the Tricentis test automation. That's going to be one of those that you could start using it from the beginning within Cloud ALM, for example, and it's let's say configurable almost out of the box once you have Cloud ALM and the Tricentis tool set up. Now, to go into a different topic, which is mainly on the SAP operations, for example. So if you're using SAP Solution Manager today for any type of monitoring or operations capabilities, there's really not a migration path from Solution Manager into these tools. So it means that anything that you're doing today from an operations side for monitoring, this is where you have to let's say, set up Cloud ALM for monitoring, and then possibly retire all of the monitoring within your SAP Solution Manager tool. And then how much you're using this operation side, you'll really have to make a decision if Cloud ALM will be the best tool for you. So for example, if you're just doing some basic monitoring, such as health monitoring, let's say some technical monitoring, and etc., then Cloud ALM would probably be the tool for you to migrate those monitoring into Cloud ALM. However, for example, if you are a customer where you have very advanced monitoring, for example, and you have, let's say, many customized templates and you're monitoring hundreds of landscapes, let's say, in this case, you might want to think about possibly also the SAP Focused Run solution, where it offers you advanced monitoring for those type of capabilities. It's very similar to SAP Solution Manager. However, it does have extended capabilities for you to be able to monitor those very heavily used, let's say, or advanced landscapes. And then something to think about, some of the ALM processes that are currently not supported by SAP Cloud ALM. This may change in the future. However, these are some of the I would say 5 or 6 items. For example, custom code management. So that's not supported by Cloud ALM. So if you're using custom code to manage your code currently in Solution Manager, that's something to think about. Data volume management, so anything as far as managing your data, and if you're using any type of archiving, etc. This is where this is also not supported. SAP Early Watch Alert is not supported, and then system recommendation. For example, this also has already moved into the maintenance planner, but that's something that also not supported. Also, business process improvement and IT service management. So anything, for example, from incidents and etc., those are also not supported within Cloud ALM. There's also one more in here that I'd like to mention is, for example, if you use in job scheduling within SAP Solution Manager, Cloud ALM does have job monitoring, but not job scheduling within as a capability. Okay, so in the next topic here, we're going to talk about implementing and optimizing your new tool set. So for example, now, as you decide to transition from SAP Cloud ALM, what is some of the first phases that you need to start to transition to Cloud ALM from SAP Solution Manager? So what we usually recommend is to primarily get a tenant going, from a SAP Cloud ALM tenant going, for example, to get familiar with the tool. So for example, get onboarded, and then maybe have a couple of samples or different types of projects within the Cloud ALM tool. So therefore, you can actually understand and see if this is the right tool for you to utilize moving forward before you even start to determine about executing the readiness check or checking the capabilities within SAP Solution Manager. However, if you do decide to go into Cloud ALM, let's say where at least some of the features, this is and you want to migrate some of the data, let's say for example, documentation, process flows, anything in that nature, libraries, then the idea would be that you execute this readiness check in Solution Manager, and then therefore it will give you an idea what you need to migrate into the SAP Cloud ALM. And then depending on the readiness check, then then you can build a transition plan, for example, depending how many projects you would like to have within Cloud ALM, and then decide to migrate this information within Cloud ALM for you to be able to start utilizing and transitioning from SAP Solution Manager. Now, so within the SAP readiness check, the goal would be that you decide some of the scope features, or which of the features you want to include within the tool. Then you would decide what are the data that you want to select that you would like to migrate. And then in here, it's actually pretty flexible as to you can decide, so you can adjust, and then you can decide which some of the information you want to bring in within the Cloud ALM. So if very similar to if you migrated from 7.1 to 7.2, for example. If there are capabilities in Solution Manager that you haven't used for years, and then there's no need for you to migrate that information. For example, let's say you have outdated business process hierarchies or custom processes and etc. Those are some of the items that you can decide to adjust or, for example, remove before you do decide to import. Also, you can simulate and correct. So at any given time, you can, for example, run a simulation. If something doesn't appear correct, you can always correct the information before you do the import within Cloud ALM. Okay, and the next topic here, so we're going to go into a live demonstration. The first step is, so we're going to go pretty much what we've done through this deck. So we're going to go into one of the integrations between, let's say, Jira and transport management. So this is one of the integrations from Core ALM. Let's take an example. If you're using Jira today, or let's say if you have it integrated with Charm and etc., and or Jira is your main tool to manage projects and changes and etc. So from Core ALM, we do have an integration where, for example, you would automatically integrate Jira into your TMS, and therefore now you can create any type of transports. You can also create transport to copies and etc. So we'll start by creating a change in here. So we're not going to go into a very detailed summary. So we'll just, this is a similar workflow as to what you do within the Jira tool. We'll just give it a sample, create a new PFCG role. And then what we offer from Core ALM is that for every change, for example, regardless if it's Jira or ServiceNow, we always have some type of toggle in here that, for example, you can mark if it's an SAP transportable change, you mark it yes, this is how the integration gets triggered. The goal for this is that you could have one project that you could utilize for SAP and non-SAP changes. So if the changes for non-SAP, you could just utilize it as is today instead of having this additional toggle. But what this happens is once we create the SAP change, it will automatically add this SAP transport tab in here, for example. And it should open up here in a second. Let me just refresh. I think it might be timed out. But it'll open automatically an SAP transport change in here. That will go to an existing one. Not sure why that's not appearing in here. And then within here, for example, you can decide what are some of the statuses. So it's fairly controllable by each status of the change. So for example, is once I start this change and set this within the development, what you'll notice is in here that then I'll have some different options in here for me to be able to create a TR, couple a TR, and refresh. So also directly in here, you could, for example, create a transport. So we'll just say PFCG role. And then you can have as many dev systems. So for example, if you have, a S4 and ECC and etc., so you would select. We also bring in the users directly in here. So what I'll do is I'll assign this to myself. And also I'll add, let's say, a task to myself as well in here. So in here, once you fill all of this information and then you click on create, it will automatically create that transport within your Jira's environment, and now you can pretty much do all of the steps that you used to do within a change management tool without actually having to Charm or let's say any other third-party tool that are out there similar to Charm. This is an integration directly to your environment. Now in here, for example, you can also do different types of things. You can create another TR, but if it's integrated within your workflow, and this is where we offer a very out-of-the-box modifier workflow, for example, where you could say when this is in progress, then at this point I can, let's say, create and import a TOC. So once I refresh this, for example, you'll see that now I have an option that I can create and import a transport of copies into the next environment. So the workflow directly manages what options you have for you to create and manage these transports. Now, what this also means is that as long as your workflow, you build some type of rules where you can manage each one of these workflows, at that point, you can decide as to what status this change can be imported into your, let's say, QA or pre or production environment. Okay, so that's for the CoreALM integration. As I mentioned earlier, there's also a similar integration or exactly the same for ServiceNow or Azure DevOps, let's say if you have one of those other tools as well. Now, in the next topic here, or the next demonstration, we're going to primarily go into SAP Cloud ALM and then start talking about each one of those capabilities that we touched based on the slide. So we're not necessarily going to go through the entire tool, but let's first maybe start talking about process authoring, which is one of the first topics that we touched based and we compared. So as we're used to in SAP Solution Manager to have different branches and etc. Within Cloud ALM, what you'll have is you'll have this version control in here, where, for example, if you do import all of your business processes, or if you create business processes diagrams directly within Cloud ALM, then what you could do is you could have them in a draft format like this one, and then if you decide to make any types of changes, let's say, at that point you could decide to either publish this to a final version, and that's how the version it's controlled within within Cloud ALM. And then this version will automatically be, let's say, published, and then it's the latest version that we are going to use for us to manage. The next topic that we're going to focus on is going to be back into the implementation stage in here again, but it's going to be around, let's say, requirements, for example, and then how do we manage, let's say, a change directly from a requirement and that we want to implement into an SAP system. So let's say, for example, if you have a specific requirement, Cloud ALM will give you an option for you to be able to create a requirement that also link it to anything else that you would like. Our goal for this demonstration is that we're going to create a requirement that we're going to tie in with a feature, which is going to be our change management focused for us to be able to create a transport and move that transport up the ladder. So to create the requirement, or actually anything within Cloud ALM, is pretty much very similar screens. So we'll call this and then towards the bottom in here, if you scroll down in the details, you have a ton of information. For example, that you can choose the type of scope that is, if you decide to have any type of deliverables, or for example, any type of work streams in here, let's say technical and infrastructure, and then you can have different types of deliverables in here for this specific project as well. There's also an approval procedure for the requirement. So by default, it's not initiated, but if you want to have an approval procedure in addition to the status of the requirement, you can also set this approval as well. And then the rest of the fields in here, such as priority, for example, effort, how long is it going to take? You can pick different types of releases in here. So this is very important. If you do decide to use Cloud ALM with transports, for example, that you choose the right release that we are going to create the transport in. And you could have as many releases as you'd like. Most of the items in here, such as theme, for example, all of this is some of the items that you would customize within Cloud ELM, for example, such as roles and etc. Users, you can decide if it's an employee or someone else, and then responsible, I will assign this to myself. You can have as many tags as you'd like, for example, in here. So depending the type of tag that you like, but you can create tags in here so that way you can filter this information fairly easy. Once you're done with this, at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save it. And then we'll just give it a second to save. It's usually much quicker than this. And then the next step that we're going to do in here for us, for example, is we're going to go ahead and create a feature. So you have different options for you to integrate this requirement with, depending the type of deliverables that you have. Our goal is really to create a feature, so therefore we can create a transport directly for this. But what we're doing is, because we're creating a feature directly for that, from that requirement, it's automatically going to take that title, and also it's directly going to integrate that requirement within this feature. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and assign that feature in here. And then as you see, as you go through this process, this integration with this will automatically integrate the requirement and any of the items that we decide to create as part of this requirement. So for example, if you want to have some smaller tasks, let's say this is for creating a new feature in SAP. If you want to have different tasks assigned to users, you could create as many project tasks in here as required for this specific feature. The next step is we're going to go ahead and go into this feature. And then in here, you'll have different types of status flows. So our first step is this is a standard status flow within the features. We're going to go ahead and start an implementation. And then as we do this, our goal is really that we're going to create an actual transport within this feature. So in here, you can, for example, depending on what project you choose, but you could have different types of, let's say, projects in here. So we're going to go ahead and select this environment, our source environment, and then what is our target environment in here as well. So we'll go ahead and create a transport. So this, given the fact that Cloud ELM, it does not necessarily trigger anything within the environment. This could take anywhere for up to, let's say, 1 to 2 minutes for a transport to be created. So we're not going to necessarily sit here and wait for the sake of the demo, because it may take up to a minute or two to create this transport, but you get the idea, for example, of how a transport is created within Cloud ELM. And then from here, you have different types of options. Once a transport is created, you decide to make the changes. You can decide to create a transport of copies directly in here. You can release a transport. And then once you release a transport, you can deploy it into the next target environment. In addition to that, Cloud ELM just released, I would say maybe a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, different types of checks that you can run in here. So it does have a downgrade protection and a cross-reference check against the production environment. So as you get up the ladder, for example, then you'll be able to run a downgrade protection and a cross-reference check on any of the transports that you have within this feature in here. But as you can see, for example, now the transport is created directly in here. And then whenever you make those changes, you can decide to copy it, do a copy, for example, of this specific transport, and then it will automatically create the transport of copies within your next environment. Okay, now in the next topic, we're going to change tracks into the operation side, and we're only going to look at a couple of items in here. But from the operation side, you'll have different types of features, for example, that are supported in operation. So for example, if you're using anything within Solution Manager, such as health monitoring, job and automation monitoring, business process monitoring, integration and exception, real user monitoring, especially if you have different agents, for example, to monitor how the different desktops, or let's say computers, our hardware is doing on different locations. You can use the real user monitoring, and then you also have synthetic and configuration and security analysis, where you can run an analysis on your security. But if you look at, for example, at health monitoring in here, you can have as many systems as you'd like, but just to kind of give you an idea, for example, you'll have, if you have a system, let's say like ours in here with 3 different clients, you'll have different types of metrics in here directly within Cloud DLM. So, for example, let's go all the way to the top in here. So, for example, any type of work processes, you can also manage dialogue steps, response times, and etc. Also, what's very good about Cloud DLM is that at any given time, if you need to modify any of these thresholds, for example, for each one of the environments, if something does not, if you see a threshold that's always, let's say, the response time is always higher than it should be in here, however, it's correct within the environment, you can always come in here and you can edit the configuration directly in Cloud DLM. And the next time that data is pushed, we no longer get that specific alert. Now, also on the job and automation monitoring. So the goal is here that if you want to monitor any of the jobs, for example, for any type of execution status, any type of application status, also if you have any type of start delay, for example, or any type of runtime, if the runtime is still long, you could monitor all those jobs within Cloud DLM for these 3 or 4 different types of metrics. And you will always can get any type of alerts, for example, at any time when there is a, let's say in our example here, if there's a cancellation for whatever reason, you will always can get an alert to your email, or maybe even your third-party tool, such as an incident management tool, where you need to monitor this specific job. But this is, for example, from a monitoring perspective, where you get a ton of information directly in Cloud DLM from your system in case there is any type of issues within your job monitoring. We're not necessarily, given the fact that we have about 8 minutes left, we're not going to go into each one of these topics in here, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open the call for questions. So Doug, are you still there? Do we want to go ahead and go through the questions?
Yeah, so thanks so much, Valdrin. So let's go through. We have a number of different questions. We'll see if we can get to them all. So the first one here, let me just pull it up. Where do you run the SAP readiness check? Can you hear me? Oops, let's see.
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you, so the question was, where do you run the SAP readiness check?
So the SAP readiness check for Cloud DLM is run in SAP Solution Manager. The goal of the readiness check is to determine, for example, what are some of the migration items that we can migrate into, that are supported by Cloud DLM, and that we could migrate into the Cloud DLM. It's pretty much just to give you an idea as to all of the information that you have within Solution Manager that need to be migrated, or you can decide what should be migrated.
Very good. That's cool. The next question we have is, what about importing Solution Manager requirements manually into Cloud ALM?
So any of the items such as requirements, tasks, user stories, they can be imported manually. In Cloud DLM, there's a template that you could export, for example, and then you might have to let's say, grab the requirements or items from Solution Manager and then manually add them to this template, and you could import them into Cloud DLM. So you wouldn't necessarily have to do a data entry one by one within Cloud DLM. So if you have hundreds, you could export them, put them in the Cloud DLM template, and import them into Cloud DLM.
Very good. No problem. Let's see. Next question. What about test cases? Can we import manual document test case?
Cloud DLM does support let's say, an Excel template or CSV that you could import. So as long as the test cases are not, let's say, Word format, or you could convert them into a CSV or Excel, it's similar to requirements. There is an import feature where you could import the test cases and then start utilizing Cloud ALM for the test cases post that.
Okay, very good. Next one, can you connect Cloud ALM to an on-prem system for transport management?
Absolutely, yes, for both on-prem and cloud. So both environments are supported for transport management.
Perfect. And then another question here, a question about Cloud ALM transport controls. Are features the only place where transports are able to be created or moved? What is the purpose of the user, story, and task?
Good questions. Yeah, features are the only, let's say, change type where you could create transports. So the user story and project tasks, those are primarily to manage any type of project tasks or any type of tasks within the tool. So an example could be you could have a requirement where you implementing something that you could have multiple project tasks assigned to different users that need to complete in order for us to deliver that specific requirement. And then also a feature would be just the utilized primarily to manage transport and promote those changes into the next environment.
Very good. Okay, got another question here. Can you connect Cloud ALM to ADO?
Yes, you can. So Cloud ALM offers an API where you could automatically push data to ADO, such as user stories or features and etc. However, in order for you to be able to update Cloud ALM from ADO, this is where you would need an integration. And we do from Core ALM, we do have a bi-directional integration where, for example, anything that you update in Cloud ALM, it will automatically also update ADO and Cloud ALM.
Very good. Okay, and I have another question here. Does Core ALM STMS support approvals from multiple approver groups? And that's the first one. Does it support scheduled deployment in certain windows?
So on the first question, in regards to the approval, so this is actually built either on Jira ServiceNow or Azure DevOps. So you would have to build those approvals at the tool level. Our goal is that we provide the integration that's integrated within a workflow. However, the workflow would have to be built. Yeah,
and I think the other thing too is oftentimes we can leverage workflows that already exist that we can take advantage of. So, and then there's obvious benefit there. And then the second one, does it support scheduled deployment at certain windows? I think that would be the same result, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be all built in, into. So we're going to remove the whatever kind of transport management system, Charm, Active Control, Realtek, whatever you're using as a third-party solution to management. We're going to get rid of that and do it all in your core Agile or DevOps tool. And so it just streamlines everything. So, but yeah, if you'd like to learn more, I'd be happy to discuss that. I think those are all the questions that we had. So I just want to thank everybody for joining. We really appreciate your interest. If you have any questions, you can go to our website or send an email to info@corealm.com, and we'll be back in touch with you. So thank you so much for joining today's presentation, and have a wonderful day.